Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today we'll be doing a review of the novel by Charlotte Brontë published the 19th of October 1847, Jane Eyre, an autobiography. Charlotte Brontë, born the 21st of April 1816 in Thornton, Yorkshire, died the 31st of March 1855 in Haworth, Yorkshire. The third of six children, Charlotte lost her mother and both of her elder sisters before she had turned 10 years old, as a result playing a sort of mentor role to her younger siblings, sisters Emily and Anne, and brother Branwell. The four siblings grew into avid poets and collaborated frequently, and when Charlotte went into teaching as a profession, she leaned into her own writing even more. While the younger brother Branwell declined into alcoholism and died at just age 31, the three sisters self-published a collection of poems together in 1846, and then each began work on individual novels. It is these three novels that we will be talking about next in this series, as far as classics go anyways, and we start with the first of these to be released, Charlotte's Jane Eyre, which was actually her second written novel, as her first was never published. To be brief about it, as this is still one of the most well-read novels in the English language, and I would imagine many of you are familiar with it already, it's fantastic, and I think this is a classic example of how having the context for when a novel came out can really help with appreciation. This novel reads well in any era, but having an idea of the novels, specifically the romance novels that came before it and built up to it, really emphasizes how this book kind of blazed its own trail at the time. One of the paradoxes of Charlotte Brontë as a figure, and really all three Brontë sisters, as the popular story goes, is how someone with such a sheltered background who spent this much time in a private school could be so subversive in their writing. Jane Eyre certainly owes its debt to Jane Austen. I think there is a fair bit of Austen's kind of sly wit in here, but Brontë is more blunt, both in her writing and in her characterizations. She's willing to tackle some hefty themes like religious expression and piety. How Jane Eyre interacts with the character of St. John Rivers is a really compelling fencing match that runs the book to its finish in a super interesting way. Let's talk about Jane Eyre herself. From the first page, you can tell that this is a very singular character, especially as far as female characters of that era are concerned. It can be debated how much Jane's character is a proxy or megaphone for Bronte's own perceptions on life. Certainly, the boarding school scenes are meant to be reflective of her own lived experience to a degree, but I think it's obvious that Brontë just kind of enjoys writing for the character. Jane is one of the best examples we've run into so far in this journey of a character who lives by their own rules and sets their own firm boundaries, even if she's occasionally facing extreme pressure to do otherwise. Especially with the timing of this novel's publication, just as women's rights activism was gaining traction across the pond in the USA, Jane Eyre's unwillingness to break or prostrate herself for men seems like a great early example of feminist writing. Even if she's not a prototypical girl boss, you get the sense she's strong-willed to a fault sometimes, and she's certainly not depicted as always having perfect judgment. But that's the beauty of it, and that's why I don't think the book's ending and how the various romantic threads are wrapped up, I don't think it ruins the book. I think it actually makes sense with how the character is written, and you certainly get the sense that sacrifices had to be made by people other than her for the book to end how it did. The first-person narrative is another thing about this book that sets it apart from its contemporaries. I honestly didn't even catch the significance of it at first while reading it, but if you think about it, not very many classic novels from pre-1847 have or rely on first-person narration. Not that it was a new literary technique. I mean, you can go back to biblical days to find examples of it, but there's a sort of formalism to third-person writing that I think Enlightenment-era writers got very caught up on, and that resulted in a sort of emotional distance from those characters. The first person, by contrast, allows a real sense of strong emotional connection because you are inside the person's thought processes. And indeed, you see early romantic poets making use of that very technique, but you don't see it in novels as much, even in that time. So Jane Eyre allowing this traditionally elegant art form called the novel to gain a real sense of intimacy is a special thing. And again, it's not just intimacy, it allows the reader to go inside Jane Eyre's head, psychologically analyze her decision making, watch her thought processes in real time again. And I think it speaks to how conscious Brontë is as a writer that even with how inside of Jane's head you are, you never completely trust that her judgment is entirely sound. There's still a rashness to her that keeps you on edge a bit, or at least that was the case for me. To be clear, she's always a sympathetic figure in the book. It's more so that sometimes I don't think the moves she makes are necessarily the greatest ideas, or at least they don't seem like the greatest ideas in the moment, although it does all work out in the end. As for Bronte's prose, it's really damn gorgeous. I think it reads more naturally and actively than most, if not all, of Jane Austen's novels, which is no small feat. There's a lot of very dark, vivid imagery in some of these scenes, often taking place in the context of a dream or a dream-like scenario, and you really feel that gothic influence coming out, which is super cool. So all in all, Jane Eyre is absolutely fantastic and well worth the acclaim, and it was enlightening to read it and, again, have more understanding of how much it seems to have evolved the concept of the novel and what we believe novels are capable of being. This was also my first time reading any of the Bronte's novels, so comparing this one to Emily's and Anne's works will be a fascinating study that I am super excited for, and I hope some of you are as well. Check Jane Eyre out if you haven't already. It gets a strong recommendation from me. And that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews are to come. Tell a friend as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.